Hello, welcome to This Week. My name is Eva. It is great to be with you, and we are so happy you could spend some time with us, either live or after the fact. This Week is a bi-weekly show on Saturday at 2 p.m. UTC. We chat about everything from current event to pop culture to politics from across the continent. Please remember to hit the subscribe button to follow Leaders of Africa on YouTube and get notifications about our event. Once again, welcome to This Week, Akwaba. Hi everyone, how you doing?
Hi, Eva.
Hey, we're good.
Good to see you.
Same.
Good to see you too.
Violet, you're looking good. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well.
Yeah, good to see you. Okay, so a lot has happened this week, and I just want to test your knowledge about this week news. I want to see how ready
Oh,
you
no.
are and how abreast you are about the news information. So, Gloria, my first question is to you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, are you ready? My first question is to you. And
I'm
there
not
is a
ready.
bonus point for this question.
I can tell you in advance that I was not watching the news this week, but yeah, let's go.
Okay,
Eva, are you
fine.
giving out prizes?
Yes, I have prizes. So you get 2
Really?
points for
Okay.
the correct answer and 1 point for a bonus question. If you get someone's questions right, you get a bonus point.
Okay, let's see what you got.
Okay, so Gloria, this is for you. This country had an election recently, and after the opposition leader casted his vote, he was put under house arrest with the military guarding his house. Even as of now, which country is this? And who is the opposition
Uganda.
leader? For 2 points.
Uh,
Great, correct for 2 points.
The opposition leader, I forgot his name. Oh my God. I forgot his name, but I know the country we're talking about is Uganda.
Wonderful. It's Uganda, of course. Ghana, who is the opposition leader?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I know the guy is a rapper, and I try to. Yeah, I know he is a rapper, and he's been very focused been in the news.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that I suddenly forgot the name of the young man. Possibly
It's so
his
very
boy too.
easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Peter,
know his
Peter,
I know
what is
his
it?
stage name, so it's Bobby Wine. But I think
Yeah.
Violet can tell
Yeah.
us his real name, because that's not his real name. That's his stage name. So I think that's an extra bonus point if we knew his actual name. Violet, what's his actual
Yes.
name?
His botanical name. Well, he's a singer, and his botanical name is Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu.
Okay.
There we go.
Bobby Wine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Also known as Bobby Wine.
Bobby Wine. Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby.
Most of us know him by his stage name, Bobby Wine. Okay, so Peter, you are the next. The next question is for you, Peter. So this African country just on Thursday announced a 15-day state of emergency after armed group tried to block the capital in a bid to topple the newly re-elected president. Which country is this? It just had an election just in December.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. There have been a number of elections that have happened. I am guessing that's got to be the Central African Republic, because we know that there's been some significant unrest and violence surrounding that re-election. Is that right?
Yes, correct for 2 points.
I don't know what these points are going to get us.
No worries.
Hopefully a trip to Hawaii.
You need to get 200 points. When you get 200 points, you'll be converted into $5. So it's a lot of money. Yeah.
Oh,
So you have
really? Oh.
Yeah, so Central African Republic has been having a lot of conflict. So we know that the election took place in December 27th, and after the president was re-elected, the rebel group are trying to get him down. But I think the UN peace mission operation were able to stop this attack, and right now, the conflict is ongoing. The tension is still there. So we're just hoping that things will calm down as the world pay attention to what is going on there. So Violet, Now you are next. The
Oh,
UK
no.
this week, just this week, banned the arrivals of nationals from 2 African countries to prevent the spread of the South African variant of COVID-19. What are the 2 countries?
Girl, I have no idea.
You got a good chance. There are 54 potential answers here. Narrows it.
That is the
Gloria,
lot.
what is it?
That
Do
is
you have
because
idea?
that's
It was
almost
just this Thursday. The UK said that they abandoned these 2 countries so to prevent
Is
from
South Africa one of
getting to
them?
the UK. They abandoned them. Listen to the question. The UK this week banned the arrivals of nationals from 2 African countries to prevent the spread of South African variant COVID-19. So they are trying to prevent them. Okay.
Is South Africa one of them? Since apparently it's South Africa.
I should believe so, but this week is different. This week, South Africa is not part of the ban. The UK has
I
been
think I
banned.
know the answer to that. I think
Okay,
I
Ghana,
know
what
the
is
answer to that.
Okay, Ghana,
I'm
what
sure
is
it's
it?
from Tanzania. Tanzania and the Republic of Congo.
Oh,
Correct
wow.
for 2 points.
Wow.
I
Yes.
never have guessed.
There we go.
Wait. What's the connection between those 2 countries and the South African strand of COVID? I don't understand. I was thinking it would be countries closer to South Africa, something like Namibia, Zimbabwe. So why
Zimbabwe.
Tanzania and the Congo?
They
I
didn't
don't know.
give
It may be there's sort of how seriously they're taking coronavirus and things of that nature. There's something that may be there. I'm not sure whether this immediately relates to the number of cases, but it may be sort of a warning sort of shot. You've got to take this seriously. If you don't take this seriously, then we're going to continue this ban, things of this nature. I'm not sure why, if it has spread, there to any degree, but maybe that's one of the reasons behind it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They didn't really provide it, but I think a reason. The UK minister just posted a Twitter post saying that these 2 countries have been banned. So I think it has to do with how seriously they are taking this. All right. So Ghana, my last question is to you. So the people of Mozambique, listen carefully. The people of Mozambique are not happy at the police for raiding restaurants and drinking bars and drinking spots. And also what the police are doing is that when they raid these places, they are confiscating a certain product in the name of stopping the spread of COVID-19 and ensuring and enforcing the COVID-19 restriction measures. So what is the product that the police are confiscating from restaurants and drinking spots?
Obviously, it's alcohol.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, so
I love how
Strategy
you say
there.
obviously.
yeah, so it's an interesting time in the news, like especially with Mozambique. The police goes around want to enforce COVID-19 restriction, and they are targeting restaurants and bars, taking alcohols, and the opposition leader is not really happy because I think they've seen so much that they don't actually know who they belong to. And also you have to think about the livelihood of the people. So people are not really happy about it. But I feel like there have to be a way to enforce these measures without taking people's things from them. Anyway, you guys all did well. You all had 2 points. And I think Ghana had a bonus point. So I've noted it. When you get up to 200 points, there is a prize for you.
That's going to be 2025.
Exactly.
Okay. So now let's get on to what is on your mind. There's been so much happened in the news, even from the beginning of this year. I mean, it hasn't been easy. We just left 2020 with a new expectation, a new resolution, thinking that 2021 will be a different year. But it's still, the challenges are still here with us. So I want to ask you, Violet, what is on your mind, Violet? What is on your mind from the news?
Well, Let me take you back to Mozambique, since that's where we just came from. So happens that Mozambique is on my mind. So I know that in the recent we've discussed Ethiopia and the regional conflict over there. Well, this time I'm taking you to Mozambique and the conflict that's in Mozambique at the moment. It's really been on my mind. So Northern Mozambique currently is steeped in a humanitarian crisis because of a civil war that's going on there, and that's in the northern province of Cabo Delgado. So far, about 500,000 people have been displaced, and the international community is being called on to, do more to help the Mozambican. So currently, about 90% of all the people who have been displaced and are either sharing housing with families that have taken them in. They're living in small spaces, sleeping on floors, sharing very small sanitary facilities. And this is creating a lot of worry because there's been an outbreak of cholera, and the rainy season has started, and that's feared to increase the current cholera outbreak. So last year, the United Nations called for about 25.4 million in aid. That's in December, which would help support about 1.1 million people, including the host countries, because some of the people fleeing the conflict have gone out of the country. But it's still continuing, and right now they're also requesting for long-term support because it's projected to be something that will take a few years and not just a few months. And because they are predominantly farmers, they're calling for more farmlands that they can return to farming and perhaps support themselves. But a little bit about a little bit about the background of the conflict. So apparently, the group that is attacking the northern part of Mozambique, that is the Cabo Delgado area, is linked to ISIS. It is a militant group which is reported to be trying to spread Islam in that part of the region. But however, they did seize a key port town called Mochimboa de Praia. I hope I'm saying it right, in August. And it is near a natural gas site that is estimated at about 60 billion US dollars. And that is a lot of money. And we all know that many times conflict is driven by profit. So apparently the government did send their armed forces after them, but they did run out of ammunition, and so were forced to retreat. And so that place was captured by the militants. And according to the defense minister, he says that apparently the militants did infiltrate the town first, and then they attacked it inside out, and so it became very hard to stop them. And even with the recruitment of armed mercenaries, who have more training to come and reinforce the army, there's been minimal equipment, low morale, and there's also poor training. And so it appears that those efforts haven't been effective. And so currently, of course, like I said, there is an active humanitarian crisis, and things are not good. And I know this is a sad story to begin the show, but the Ethiopian crisis is still ongoing, and now this has come in on board. And well, it did start in 2017, so it's not something that is new, but it's something that is gaining time, and it's a sad thing to talk about because Africa is suffering a lot of armed conflict, civil wars, like in so many pockets, the DRC, Ethiopia, Somalia. And it seems like all these hotspots do have one thing in common: natural resources. I don't know what the team has to say, but that's what's on my mind at the moment.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. And obviously, Mozambique is a country that has experienced intense violence over the past, 30 years to varying levels, right? We can think back to the Civil War period. But then after the Civil War period, there's a period of calm. But the opposition leader, one of the opposition leaders or the main opposition leader in the country and the movement has traditionally had an armed resistance component to it. So there's always been this sort of sense of resistance to the center, to the legitimacy of the center and of the government. So this is nothing new. Maybe it's taking on a sort of a new character, perhaps, but this has always been present. And one of the things that one can think about with a more sustained militarized conflict is the solutions to that conflict. What can be done to sort of put an end to that? In the case of Mozambique, from my understanding, is that a significant amount of the approach has been emphasizing military approaches, sort of dealing with them by, arresting them, putting people in prison, things of this nature, or attacking them, right? And in the northern part of the country right now, a lot of those who are fighting this battle right now are private security contractors from outside. So I'll put up on the screen here. Let's put it up. So this is one of the group, the DAC, maybe I'm not pronouncing that right, advisory group. It's based in South Africa. And they've been one of the key sort of private military security contractors that is doing the sort of the bidding in that northern part of Mozambique, right? And so I think what this shows you, and you can see that they're into a lot of things. They do counter poaching activities in the region, things of this nature, as well as sort of providing security. But I think this raises the central point of the abdication of the central government to really not only deal with this in a sort of a military sense, but also the political sense that would allow for some sort of long-term, more durable peace to come about in the region. And I think when folks talk about this in terms of a religious insurgency, I think they miss the point, and I think you were getting at this, Violet, that there are all these other dimensions that are there. And I think largely when it comes to this region, it's a political problem that requires a political solution. And I think one of the things that people have been agitating for is more money to the region, or this authority that is supposed to, disperse money and create development in the region. So I think this is something to take a look at. It raises that issue of political versus military solutions, which we can see in other regions, as you mentioned, other so-called hotspots like Ethiopia, right? The military solution seems to be the go-to solution. But if you look deeper, there are these political dimensions, there are these dimensions of the legitimacy of the state that need to be taken into account. And then we see these other actors getting involved, like private military or organizations and corporations. So I think it's also a case study of that as well.
I have a quick
Yeah.
question. I'm curious about one thing that you just mentioned, Peter, private military. This company that you talked about that is coming from South Africa. I don't understand. Are they working for the government of Mozambique? Is this an additional measure in on top of the local military, or how does this work?
Yeah, so I believe there's probably some relationship between the government and this private military company, right? In a sense, an outsourcing of security to some degree, although I'm not quite sure, so I don't want to venture to guess there. There was a recent piece on this actually from the Council of Foreign Relations, which is an organization that looks at sort of conflict and issues around the world. It's based in Washington, and they mentioned this group, the South African DAC Advisory Group. They remain in sort of one of the key hotspots, the Cabo Delgado area. And they've been the ones that have been, dealing with this insurgency. And I think they're also most probably linked a bit with other regional governments around that are concerned with what's going on in Mozambique, primarily South Africa. Now, some countries like Zimbabwe have said that SADC, which is the regional body, should start getting involved in the conflict, right? So there's been a regionalization of the dispute. So in some senses, and this has been seen in other areas, where these private military groups operate on behalf of also foreign governments as well, right? There's that partnership that takes place there. I'm a little unclear about the nature of that, because a lot of these agreements and contracts are not something that is openly shared or as openly shared. And I think that's part of the problem that many people have with them, is that there's this sort of shadow around these private military groups that are subcontracting. And I know the U.S. and a lot of countries do that. In fact, one of President Trump's cabinet member, Betsy DeVos, was the the sister of a guy who has run operations all throughout the continent of Africa on behalf of a lot of different interests. So this is something that requires a lot of attention. We see it here in Mozambique.
Oh yeah, and if I
Yeah.
may, just to add to what Peter said in response to the question Gloria asked, apparently, according to public record, they were brought in because the security forces in Mozambique were poorly trained and there was low morale and they were unable to beat back the militant group, and that is why they were brought in to sort of like supplement what the Mozambicans had and hopefully raise morale in the process as well.
Yeah,
But
so my
apparently,
concern
it's
is
not.
yeah, so my concern is about the use of private security forces. Of course, from the pragmatic point of view, it may be a necessary thing to do, given the explanation by Violet. But could that be one of the reasons why the government is not willing to explore the political solution to this brewing crisis? Because private companies are there to make money, and getting them out of the process or navigating the political solution or dimension to solving the problem might mean that they may be soon out of business of offering their services over there. So I was wondering, could that be one of the driving factors why the political dimension is receiving, is not receiving the deserved attention? And an additional question to that is this: what is the interest of the imperial forces that colonized Mozambique in all of this? And how may that be intervening with the refusal to leverage the political solution to this crisis? Are they interested in the resources over there? In the disputed area? Are they interested in that particular resource? And so I'd like to know your views on these two questions.
Well, Ghana, you ask very interesting questions, and they are important questions that need to be asked because they do need answers. But as Peter said earlier, most of these agreements are steeped in the shadows, and it's very hard to know what exactly is entailed in these agreements. So many things that we see politically that are public knowledge are not the whole picture. So many things are classified. But at least one thing that I can be sure about is that at the bottom of every war there is profit. So if you follow the money, you'll always find that there's a resource, an economic resource. Capital is always, at the bottom of all these insurrections. And that is why when you look at the Congo, you'll find a lot of natural resources that are almost nowhere in the world. If you look at Cabo Delgado itself, like I was saying, it is right next to a $60 billion natural gas site. Otherwise, why is it not in any other part of the country? So if you follow the link, you'll find that there's someone who's interested in benefiting from that resource. And then all of the political mire that happens thereafter is sometimes just to mask the scent. And then, of course, there are agreements, and we all cannot disagree that we're still under the influence of neocolonialism. Our governments can't say that they are independent. That's not true. But then we can't know exactly to what extent the players are involved and who all the players are and what all the mechanics are, because this information is not made public. And I don't really know if there's even a way to make that information public.
Yeah. So for me personally, my concern is about why do they always have to source private military groups instead of, like, say, the Mozambique government talking to neighboring government to bring in some of the militaries from those countries to help fight the conflict. You get it? And also there is the African Union. Why won't you coordinate with the African Union, like the Security Council or something, to help them resolve this issue instead of all the time when there's conflict on the continent and they feel like their military is incapable, they have to source, like, say, a private security group, because that is a lot of money. And that money you pay to those private security groups can be used to train your military, right? For them to be more effective and capable. So for me, my concern is, why are these neighboring countries not coming together to form a stronger joint force, like a stronger military task force, You get it? So that whenever a conflict arises, they know that there is this standby military task force that will come in and solve the problems for them. Because if we have this on the continent, I don't think that there is a need for us to always bring in private security group like Boko Haram like this. I know that private security people came in to fight them when they started. So let's imagine in West Africa, there is a West Africa military task force. So whenever there's conflict arise, ECOWAS will say that let mobilize our security task force to go and help our neighbors because it affects the whole region. You get it? SADC, there should be a SADC
Right.
military task force that rise up in cases like this because it affects the whole region. It doesn't just affect Mozambique, it affects South Africa because you are going to have all these displaced people. At the end of the day, we would like to travel to a country that is safer, Angola, South Africa, and all the neighboring countries. So if there is a military task force, they come together and form this joint military task force. I feel like it's going to help them to resolve this issue and not necessarily bring in private security group. And as you are saying, most private security groups, yes, they are there to solve the conflict, but at the end of the day, they will go home with a lot of money. You get it?
Yeah.
And it depletes
Right.
the country of that the country is depleted of that money. So we have to think strategically about how we deal with conflict on the continent.
I totally like that
Yes.
idea. And if I may say, there's been I'll call it an experiment of what Eva just described in the DRC. I remember the period of that transition period between Mobutu, who had been in power, for like 3 decades, and then when the next administration came in, there was a lot of conflict in the region, and we had military support. And these were not private groups. This was official
Mhm.
military support from Angola, from Zimbabwe, and Namibia. That was the largest and the strongest military coalition that helped stabilize the DRC for a period of time, and that worked. They were not there necessarily. Of course, in politics, there's always interest, but I think that worked much better than these private groups that come in. As you said, we never know what's in the contract, how much money they're making, and I feel like if we can strengthen those alliances in that way, as exactly how Eva described that, maybe we will get somewhere.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's a
it's
very brilliant deposition. But my concern has always been the politics of conflict and the economics of conflict. Because the politics of conflict seems to always take the forefront when such a decision is to be made. And it's about the leadership as well. If the leadership is actually concerned, is patriotic to the people of the country, is patriotic to the oath of office that they've sworn allegiance to, it's very much possible that they can explore other options. And again, it's also about the relationship with neighboring countries and regional stakeholders. If a political leadership doesn't have a very, favorable disposition to neighboring countries and regional stakeholders, chances are that the route to be followed is the route of bringing in what they call the private security forces. In the case of Nigeria, the time we made use of our private security forces, if I'm not mistaken, was during the presidency of Jonathan. And that was during the election time. And it was obvious to President Ibeli, Jonathan Goodluck, that he was going to lose the election. So he needed a desperate mayor. And the desperate mayor was to bring in the private security forces. And in fairness to them, and based on expert opinions, they did very well. They did very well. And but during the presidency of General Muhammadu Buhari, which is still ongoing in the country, he did away with them. He said he rather would put resources in equipping the national security forces to be better prepared to take on the crisis of Boko Haram. And that has been doing, and they've always gone the route of collaborating with Nigeria Republic, with Cameroon, other neighboring countries to ensure that they put forces together to deal with this kind of crisis. And the other dimension to this, the traditional, it's also about the nature of the conflict. When you are dealing with guerrilla warfare, the traditional military or the conventional military in Africa may not be well prepared to take on guerrilla, battles, type of battles. And so they may resort to private security arrangements that have the capacity to fight in this kind of setting. And that has been the case in some, situations in Africa where they have to leverage, private security forces to help address or stem the tides of insurgency or internal civil crisis. But by and large, I prefer the option of collaboration among regional and continental level forces to help address this, and we did it effectively well in Necomong. When there was crisis in Liberia, ECOMOG put together military forces that was, led by the Nigerian military, and we were able to make very remarkable inroads into addressing the problem over there. So I think we need to go more into this and leverage this. But at the end of the day, these decisions are not linear. They are a little bit complex. A lot of interest comes into force where such a decision is going to be made. International business entities who are running security outfits, they always want to manipulate the process as well. And the leadership, the current leadership in the troubled country, they might also be interested in the monetary component of it. And by
Okay.
going the route of working with neighboring countries, they may not necessarily make more money compared to employing private security forces. Whatever it is, I think the option to be taken should be in the best interest of any country, economically pragmatic, and it should be militarily pragmatic as well, because it may be pragmatic to actually make use of private security forces depending on the existing conditions. But wherever it is, this route of building a regional security arrangement to intervene in such a crisis situation might be something that in the medium and long term we need to start working towards in Africa.
And
Okay,
I
Ghana.
want to just
Yeah,
build.
okay.
I know Eva
Yeah.
wants to move us on, but I just want to build on one quick thing here. And I think this is a big decision that has to be made here, and we're discussing it, right? One option is the state is limited, and we're going to subcontract out. The other one is we build the state sort of capacity. And the other one is we rely on external but regional capacity, right? And I think these are different decisions. Obviously, regional neighbors can help and should help if things get to a level in which it's hard to contain, hard to police, hard to sort of deal with internally. But if Mozambique itself, or any country for that matter, wants to maintain its sovereignty as an individual country, then they're going to have to put time, energy, and capacity into their security forces, but more their political and social contract that they have as a country, right? And I think if we think regionally and we say, oh, the region will sort of solve our problems, then that takes our eye off of that ball of the individual country dealing politically and sometimes militarily with the conflicts and the concerns that are happening within their borders. Now, I think one of the things we have to think about is that borders can be reimagined, and I think this is something that we're debating here. And the fact that the borders are a colonial imposition may make these borders not so worth defending, right? So, in that sense, perhaps that a regional solution is a good solution, but I think that regional solution has to be paired with further regional integration, right? It can't just be the regional military solutions, right? It has to be regional political, regional economic solutions if we're going to challenge the borders that are present. So, I mean, I don't have an answer to this question. I think people are trying to figure that out. And I think that's at the crux of this, I believe, is that big decision.
All right. Thank you
Yeah.
all. That was really insightful. There is more to talk about, but we have to move on to the next thing. So, Ghana, tell me what is on your mind this week.
Yeah, for the most part, I've been, I've not been available to follow a lot of events in different African countries as I usually would do. For two reasons. One, I've been following events in Nigeria. There's a guy who's been making a lot of noise, and I've been wondering why Twitter, Facebook are still keeping this guy on their platforms. His name is Sunday Boo. He's one of those, nuisance element that is trying to frame himself as an activist speaking for the Yoruba people. And he's recalling to crisis, that the Fulani people in Nigeria, that the Yoruba should fight against the Fulani people, dislodge them from his own fatherland. And I wonder which is his fatherland and which is the country's fatherland. So I spent a significant amount of time on that. But more concerning to me is the issue that is ongoing in Tunisia. And as many of you are aware of, I've been a follower of Tunisia for many reasons. One of the reasons why I follow issues in Tunisia is because of my interest in organic farming. They have one of the most developed organic farming system in Africa, and in fact, I conducted a study about 8 years ago, thereabout, on the organic farming system in Tunisia and Uganda. The one in Tunisia is state-led, and so I've always followed the event in Tunisia to know how development, political instability may be affecting the organic food production system in Tunisia. And over the years, it's been so resilient. So the crisis I'm going to be talking about today in Tunisia is seems to me a relic of what happened in the past, where again in Tunisia, there was an insurrection that started and it spread across a lot of the countries in that region. It affected Egypt, it affected Morocco, and I believe that might be happening again. There have been a couple of a number of protesters in the hundreds, particularly in the northwest of Tunisia, northwest of Tunis. They've been protesting against, issues of poverty, and deteriorating conditions of living in the country, and rising unemployment that particularly affect the younger population. I'm not talking about the younger population, we're talking about people between the age of 15 and 25. Tunisia is also a significantly youthful country, and but unfortunately, because of the issues of COVID-19 and the issue of struggling economic condition, more than anything, this particular population group has been affected tremendously. It's so difficult for them to find a job. It's so difficult for them to feed themselves. And when very young populations are unemployed, they get easily agitated and frustrated. And they have always learned to leverage the street because they did it in the past in Tunisia, and they brought about a change in leadership. And I think the same thing is motivating them. However, unlike in the past, whereby, the spark just got fire and spread across the entire country, a good number of the population in Tunisia currently, they are expressing some reservation because they've been asking this question that the last revolution that they led in the country, as it led to economic transformation that they anticipated. So there has been some concerns and reservation on some part of the people. But the story now is that the government is following the old trick of always, unleashing state police to stop protesters. And that is currently ongoing in Tunisia. And it's a hope that the situation is not going to escalate to that of the situation we currently have in Libya. So that's the situation currently as we talk in Tunisia, particularly in the northwest part of Tunis, that is called Etadamen. I hope I got the pronunciation of that particular neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that is populated by very poor people, and it's been abandoned and marginalized over the years by different governments in Tunisia. So that seems to be, to me, one of the core drivers of the crisis, of the protests that we currently are experiencing in Tunisia. And, that COVID-19 is also playing into it, makes it, a very concerning situation. Because COVID-19 has wrecked economics, even in developed nations, let alone in developing countries like Tunisia, that the economy has been off and on for a considerable period of time.
Well, Ghana, I'm really glad you brought that up. And like we said sometime back on the show, that COVID-19 has it's basically all about inequality. And then COVID-19 was just a catalyst that sort of like just exacerbated all these inequalities, because I was following that story in Tunisia, and you could clearly see that there was one part of the population that was disgruntled and is demonstrating and crying out against all of what they're suffering. And then the other portion of the population that's saying, oh, we don't want these demonstrations because they are interrupting our businesses and things like that. And when you compare the two, they are clearly on different socioeconomic statuses. And I do remember one thing that stuck out for me. One of the residents of Etadame was saying that when the media comes in, or when the government highlights the crisis, they talk about the violence, they highlight the violence, but nobody is really highlighting why the violence is there to begin with. And that struck a chord in me, and I'm like, that sounds about, critical, because yes, they are highlighting the violence, but no one is talking about why the violence is there in the first place. And there was a lot of talk about unemployment. And like you said, a very huge part of the population is very youthful. And these are people who need to be put to work. And of course, if they're not put to work, there's going to be disgruntlement. So again, there's layers to this. And the pandemic is just a catalyst that has exacerbated the inequalities and all the underlying problems that have been there from the very beginning. And if these governments do not tackle what's at the bedrock of all of this, then I think it's still going to be cyclical, because one of the youth was quoted to have said, we need another revolution. But is that the answer? Because then if there's another revolution and another government comes in and doesn't solve those underlying issues, then there's going to be need for another revolution.
So this
Yeah.
has been the concern of a good number of the population in Tunis, because in this particular part of the country, they were part of the previous revolution, and they had a high expectation that the new government that revolution brought in was going to bring about a change of life and improve livelihood conditions in several parts of Tunisia, and particularly in the marginalized areas of the country. But as we all know, a revolution does not necessarily mean change of guard, because a
Right.
revolution can be hijacked. It doesn't mean that new faces will come on board and chart a new path towards the development of the country. And this is why there has been a lot of reservation from some other component of the country, that even when there are challenges, when there are problems, that it appears that there is a need to try other alternative of addressing problems rather than call to the street and be in Libya. The revolution that started in Libya has turned the country into a full, a mess, a complete mess. Libya is in a complete mess. And when you look at the dictator in Egypt, he calls himself a democratic leader. The killer called Sisi. A revolution brought in El Sisi. And in this particular revolution, people had very high expectation that things were going to improve in Egypt. And that has not been the
Right.
case. And it's been so, domineering. It has no such credential that one can attribute to a democratic leader. It's just like the whole will of Mubarak that the revolution toppled. So people are concerned. Some people are concerned in Tunisia that this may not necessarily lead to a new lease of life. At the same time, something more concerning that we experience in protests, NSAS protests in Nigeria, is this issue of looting. And it was one of the things that also happened in the Black Lives Matter protest in the United States. And, people have always been talking about it, that calling to protest, does it mean that people have the right to start looting other people's resources? Because the resources that people are looting, they are resources of struggling families, that are struggling to feed their families in this very difficult situation. And this is one of the ways, one of the areas where we have to draw the borderlines, that there are certain lines of distances that we don't cross even in abnormal situation, in struggling and concerning situation when we are on the barricade. And one such line is looting and destruction of public properties. Because in a country that is resource poor, that is struggling, and people are protesting against perceive and observe real injustice in the country, what is expected of them is to bring more people to embrace their protest, to embrace their agitation. But when you start looting people's resources, common people like you, when you start looting their resources, then you begin to lose that critical support that is necessary to drive home to realization the compelling point that has necessitated that people leverage the barricade to drive home and achieve their agenda, their agitation, and their concern. When we start all sort of things, then you begin to lose a lot of support that is necessary for you to realize the objective. So this is one of the concerning things to me in the unfolding protest situation in Tunisia.
Yeah,
Ghana,
I
if I
mean,
may push
one of the
something in
things, one of the issue that came out has to do with the loot, and I remember when I was reading the article yesterday. One of the vendors by the roadside said that he has to stand to protect his store and also that of his neighbors, because if they don't do that, they will come and loot. And he was talking about the fact that is this protest calling for economic change, or is an opportunity for people to just steal and feed themselves because people are hungry. Like, he was also complaining of the fact that people cannot even get, like, say 5 cent, or I don't know their currency, 5 cent to buy baguette. So it's concerning. And one of the things we call attention to is that the protest actually happens in the night too. And it was like, oh, what protest happens in the night if not they wanting to loot? So it's an issue because the moment people start looting, the whole purpose of the protest is defeated. Now, politicians will not pay attention to you. They'll rather send in the military or the police force to use strong tactics to disperse them. And that is a worrying situation. So I believe that concerning protests, especially the protest organizers, should come out with a clear, defined agenda. This is where we are going. This is what we want to do. Okay, we are protesting. We are marching from here to the parliament. We have a list of agenda we want them to do for us, right? We will give them, say, 10 days. If they don't do it, then we will come back again. We will pressure them and force them until they've done something about it. Because if protest is good, protest is a way for us to draw the attention of issues happening in our society that we need government to address immediately. But if we go for protests and we start attacking the same people in our community, we start taking the same resources from the people in our community, the little that they have, then I don't think that is protest. You call it something else. And in that case, I mean, its purpose is defeated.
I just want to add quickly on what we've been talking about, especially the issue of protests and the looting part. The thing is, when you have a large number of people gathered, it's very hard to control people. It's very hard to know who's coming, who's gonna do what. We know in every society there are criminals, anarchists. There are people who will always look for an opportunity, take advantage of what's going on, and to just come with their own agenda. And that is something that is very, very hard to control. There are people who are just waiting. Maybe there are people who steal on a regular basis, and then you present this opportunity that make it easier for them to do what they've always done. And so that's why, for me, I think governments need to respond quickly. The moment there's a crisis, the moment there's a concern, respond quickly. At least do something. At least show interest. Something that can show the population that, okay, you're listening. Okay, you're interested in our problems. And even though in many of these cases in Tunisia and other places where we've seen protests, solutions will not come overnight. It requires a lot of work with different levels of society and different people involved. But at least our government need to show concern. They need to show, and some of the issues that were brought up in the case of Tunisia, issues related to COVID. organize whatever it is that can help people in the immediate. I don't know, food banks, whatever. It doesn't solve people's problems. At least it solves the need of today. And then let's come together and discuss and see how we can, find solutions to our problems.
So Gloria, I love those points, but there are two things, and I think we had this conversation about answers, because the issue of protest is this: leading a protest means that you are aware of the consequences, that it can turn against you. A protest can turn against the very purpose for which a protest is organized. And that is why we don't just call to the street. For those of us that have a barricade experience, we've made mistake on the barricade in the past. I've leveraged the barricade severally. I've been part of several protests in the past. And given the opportunity, maybe I will still engage in protests again, but I'm not too sure of that. But one thing I've learned participating, leading protests, is that there's always the need to have that conversation. Because this element you're talking about, we are aware that these are issues that happen during protest. And that is why, as smart protest leaders, it's also required that there must be mechanism put in place to make sure that people are not exploiting the protest for other disingenuous activities, for ignoble activities. And that is why it's very important. Pre-planning activities that goes into a protest is as important as the real protest itself. Because once a protest is hijacked, the government can easily step in and, use that as an excuse to unleash the terroristic power of the state to suppress protest. And we must not give the government the leeway for this to happen. And that is why, as protest leaders, we need to be prepared and put in place all the necessary logistics that will make sure that every single person that participates in the protest keep by the demands and the what's allowed, the do's and don'ts of participating in a particular protest. Protests are no reason for people to be looting properties. Protests are no reason for people to be constraining.
But in fairness, I think what you're asking requires a lot of resources, a lot of command and control, a lot of time, a lot of planning. These are things that those who are engaging these protests oftentimes don't have, right? And I think that's a critical part that we have to acknowledge in that, right? We're not talking about professional organizations. Sometimes we're talking about more spontaneous, discontent that is there because, even because they are under-resourced. And I think that's one thing. Second thing is some of the hijacking oftentimes comes from the optics of the government or those people who are against the protesters as well. And so I think we have to be very critical about what we're attributing to what the protesters are doing and how they're behaving, right? And how that dynamic is there. So I at the one hand, I would agree that there needs to be some sort of planning, some sort of discussion of general strategy. But there are all different types of protests, some that are more spontaneous, ones that are less spontaneous, and also ones that are more resourced and those that are not resourced. Not every protest has the money to print out T-shirts, to make some sort of unified message that is there and all the publicity that goes around that, right? And so I think we have to be a little bit careful. Of course, violence is not a concern. It is a concern when it happens, I should say. Sorry. It is a concern when it happens. And I think the one thing that I will say that came out of this discussion that I felt like was interesting was that what they are driving for, the ends of the protest, right? So perhaps we could say they don't have as much strategy, but at least they have a very clear vision about what they are trying to move forward, right? That may not take as much resources to come up with. In Tunisia, as you've alluded to, Ghana, they have gone through a democratization process. And so it's about resources, but it's also about the fact that, democracy has been sort of, embraced to some degree in the country, but has not come into full fruition. So I think 52% of Tunisians, according to Afrobarometer, are not satisfied with the way that democracy works in their country, despite having sort of the only Arab Spring country to sort of more fully embrace democracy. So I think we can say that the protesters or these movements should think about their ends, think about their goals a lot more. But we also have to sort of reserve judgment just a bit about sort of some of the intricacies of the strategic calculus there, because not all of these movements are well resourced or organized.
All right. Thank you. There's so much to talk about when it comes to protests, because it happens. And that is the first means people community use when they're not happy about something. So I want to get back to you, Peter. So what is on your mind? Like what in the news got your attention this week?
Yeah, so we've been talking about sort of the regional, our conversation was talking about the regionalism of disputes in Mozambique. But we also have some more sort of positive regionalism approaches that are ongoing. And one is sort of the regionalization of higher education. And I want to put up on the screen here, this is a map of the African continent, obviously. And the countries that are shaded in dark green are countries that are members of an organization or a trade configuration called COMESA. And so some of you may have heard of that. Those who are in the light green are countries that were once part of COMESA, but then thereafter left. And COMESA sort of has its roots in a preferential trade agreement in the 1980s. 1981, they came up with this sort of trade agreement that would allow a little bit more free trade in the region. And then they sort of adopted that into COMESA in 94. And then they turned it into a free trade area in 2000. So, and it's notable about that, put up the map again, is it's a very large free trade area or aspiring free trade area that spans all the way from Tunisia, we've just been talking about. And Tunisia actually was Tunisia and Somalia were the last two countries that joined in 2018. So they were the last two countries. So they expanded up in sort of north and also east. And they purport to do a lot of things, mainly on the issues of trade. But what was on my mind this week was what they were doing in the areas of education, and something that we see, burgeoning now at the African Union level, as well as here in the COMESA level, which is offering scholarships and funding to students that want to study in universities in the region, issues that pertain to not their own country, but issues of the region and of integration more broadly. And obviously, as part of Leaders of Africa, we care about this issue of Pan-African integration and higher ed. So I think this is an issue that straddles both of that. And so just to map out the program really briefly. So the program is starting with about 18, it started with 18 scholarships last year and is sort of building to promote students going to some of these institutions, including the University of Zimbabwe. And one of the key pillars of this this program is Kenyatta University, which some of you may know, which is in Nairobi, Kenya. So we see money and resources at this regional level in the context of COMESA supporting this type of research. I will note one thing, though, about the finances from this is that a good amount of that finances appears to trace itself to the European Union and outside donor countries. And that is, now outside the norm, because many of these regional bodies receive a good chunk of their budget from other external partners that are there. And we can talk about that. But leaving that aside, and that sort of discussion aside, I think there is some hope for this regionalization and also how regionalization plays into the increase of the quality of higher education. So that's my sort of more hopeful story of integration in education.
So as a build up to things, about 4 or 5 years ago, I met a group of scholars, and I was really happy about this. At the University of Ibadan. And that was the first time I became aware of a similar arrangement, continental level arrangement. For the most part, what we are aware of is PhD student, student in Africa, graduate student wanting to leave the continent to go study abroad, and we apply for scholarship to do that. But so interestingly, I came across these young, beautiful, intelligent folks from different African countries. Some came from Botswana, some came from Kenya, and from different African countries. And they have a particular hall of resident that I was lodged myself. It's a very expensive one. Not the student from Nigeria can actually afford that. But because these guys are paid in dollars, so they have these particular hall of resident that they call the Akonde Hall at the University of Ibadan, where they lodge. Electricity is available 247, even when there are strikes in Nigerian university. The academic activities of these scholars are never affected. There was a time that there was a strike and they had to complete their program. The University of Ibadan made sure that those students, those set of students, were able to write the exam. And what I love about the program is this: people from different African countries, they will select different countries that they want to study. It's a very competitive process. And once you are able to win the scholarship, they will send you to a university in Ghana, a university in Nigeria, and in some 4 or 5 other African countries. And one thing I really learned from this crop of young African intelligentsias is that they begin to appreciate the culture of their host country. There is one lady, Fatomata, that's what she calls herself. I call her Fatima because that's how we pronounce the name in Nigeria. She's from Mali, and she happens to be studying aquaculture. So I met her, and she was one of the scholars in this program, and she told me a lot of beautiful things she appreciated about Nigeria. Even when she went back home, she started becoming like a big ambassador for Nigeria and Mali. And she loved the culture so much. So this is one of the benefiting factors that this kind of arrangement we are going to get from this kind of arrangement in Africa. But my concern is this, Peter. Last fortnight ago, we spoke about the billionaires. I want to know the contributions of the billionaires to this kind of continent level arrangement. Where is Dangote in all of this? Where is Mo Ibrahim in all of this? Must the money be coming from European countries? Must the money be coming from United Nations? Must the money be coming from the United States? I believe if we really want to earn our respect in the world, it is high time the billionaires in African countries see this as important project that their name should be associated with. Because it makes profound statement about our readiness to leverage our resources to advance our own development. And this is one concern I have about this project. And hopefully the likes of Dangote and the other billionaires in the continent will begin to put their resources to support this kind of arrangement. Even look at what we're doing at the Leaders of Africa, the Leaders of Africa Institute. Very fantastic project supporting building capacity, using our own money, using our own resources, using our own time to train intelligentsias on the continent. And we don't go begging for money because we are just contributing to the development of the continent. But it's not everybody that run things based on passion, based on their own resources. So hopefully for somebody like me, what I'm calling to, and what I will always emphasize is that African millionaires, they need to take ownership of this project. Because when the funding drains from some of these foreign countries, from some of these international development agencies, some of these very beautiful and generationally impactful, continentally impactful program may just die off. And they shouldn't die. We need to sustain them to build collaboration, to build synergy, to build togetherness on the continent.
Very valid points there, Ghana. Before Peter, before you take that question, just a quick one. Mine is easy. Is this open to every country, every student who is a part of that trade agreement, or how does this work? Are they only selecting kids from specific countries? I'm a bit curious about that, and then we can dive into what Ghana just talked about.
It's a little unclear in terms of the couple of press releases that they put out, the specifics of how this is managed. It is emphasizing more on sort of the graduate level, at least for now. So like you were thinking master's levels programs. So this goes to what Ghana was saying, sort of thinking about the postgraduate sort of studies of this. It is sort of my understanding that it will be focused on those who are in the COMESA region, because they want them to study issues that are more related to sort of COMESA integration, and also how that interacts with the larger Pan-African continental integration as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ghana, the billionaires, some of them are doing something. I know that the Mo Ibrahim Foundation have a scholarship scheme that brings students, especially PhD students and master students, to the UK, and these are fully funded programs. And when they finish, he ensures that they get internship opportunities in places like African Development Bank and other places, and they go back home to contribute. I know a friend of mine who actually was part of the Mo Ibrahim Scholars Program and went to the University of Birmingham in the UK. And when she finished, she came back, worked for a while, then had another opportunity to go and do a PhD at somewhere else. So some of them are doing something, but I don't really know about Dagote and the others. But I know that Mo Ibrahim is so passionate about Africa, and his organization has been investing a lot in terms of capacity building and research and other things on the continent. Actually, just last week, they just came out with the 2020, the African Government Index, right? That is something that they do in terms of studying the African government and ranking them in terms of who is doing what, who is doing well, and things like that. So there needs to be more people involved. We need to resource our own, we need to get our own resources locally. We need to generate it locally so that we have a way to sustain it instead of always depending on foreign entity. And when the foreign entities are done, they don't have the money to help us, then the program dies off. So that is something that we have to think about in terms of we financing our own educational stuff on the continent.
Yeah, I mean, the billionaires and millionaires getting involved, I think, is useful. Although, in my opinion, I don't need to know whether they got involved. Ideally, we would not want to know whether they were getting involved. It's better for them to share their money and share their charity without putting their name on everything, right? I think that's one thing to emphasize. The second thing is, it's not just about the super wealthy in this process. And I think you alluded to that, Ghana, which it's about those who have been fortunate who are in sort of that upper middle class as well, right? That aren't sort of the super uber wealthy, right? But those who are of these upper middle class and developing that value of giving back to one's community, not fortifying the wealth that is present there within the family and moving that forward. I think it's about broadening the giving back that takes place as well. So it's not all on the backs of the super wealthy, although as we've all agreed that they can play a major part in that.
And the one point I like to make is this: I like what Mo Ibrahim is doing and sending some folks or European countries and the likes. But some of the things somebody like me will be pushing for is this kind of arrangement whereby we can leverage our local universities in Africa, the best of the best, put some of these students through these institutions for many reasons. Sometimes we discount the financial implication on the economics of our local universities when we get our students to do their PhD at home. Look at the money, the huge amount of money that Mo Ibrahim is going to spend on those kids, on those young folks schooling in European universities. If that money is invested, maybe in a university in Ghana, like those schools, they pay that huge amount of money in a university in Ghana, you may be surprised that over the years, that may go a long way to help address some of the infrastructural gaps, deficit in such university. And the other thing is this: When a Mo Ibrahim knows that the student that is supporting to do their PhD at the University of Lagos, it comes to be aware of some questions about infrastructural gaps, about capacity gaps that may inhibit those kids from having substantive quality educational experience. It may then begin to prioritize the need for him to also invest more money in addressing some of this institutional graph or bringing some of his friends from abroad, from different parts of the world, to come participate in the process of fixing those institutional graph. And just like Peter mentioned, there is one thing that I've come to realize about education. When you look at Auntie Ngozi Iweala, who was a former minister of finance in Nigeria, she was not educated in the continent. Her educated experience, of course, maybe she had some education, her educational experience at the university level was here in the United States, up till her PhD level. And when she went back home, she struggled with the local economy because all the examples, all the experiences she was used to were experiences and examples from abroad. I'm not speaking or discounting the relevance of being educated abroad. What I'm saying is that where you study significantly determines how better prepared you are to address problem in a particular area. And that is why, to me, we need to begin to look inward to see what we can leverage in our local institution. And that has been my critiques, as some of you are aware of MasterCard program. And the huge amount of money that MasterCard program is investing, getting kids to be educated abroad, they can start looking for universities like in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Mozambique, in Zimbabwe, that where they can support some of these scholars to do their education either at the undergraduate level or at the graduate level, and so that will begin to build this internal synergy, just like we are doing at the Leaders of
And
Africa.
the good news is, Ghana, just on that point about the MasterCard Foundation, that is exactly what they are doing. So I want to be very clear about that. So they've built that program, thinking about, how do we capacitate the continent and go back, give back in that approach. And that has had a lot of success, as we know, as part of our team, that has had a lot of success. But now they've been really strategically focusing on partners on the continent, to ensure that capacity is in those higher education institutions, including Ashasi University having a program that is enhancing higher education and is doing outreach with universities, right? So I think they've already taken on board that strategy that in terms of their approach, I will have to say.
Yeah, to what Peter said, there are actually Massacre Foundation programs in a number of universities in Africa. Two in South Africa that I'm personally aware of, and there's one in Kenya, if I believe. A couple, I would say 5 or so universities as well. And Uganda, yeah.
Yeah, and also Ghana. It's not just Ashasi, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. So they are doing a lot. Ghana, it takes time. Like, say, I know that the Boy Ibrahim Foundation like this is also building capacity in Sudan and other places. They are doing it. We just need to find out what they are doing and how best they are helping. It's mostly about the outcome. For me, it doesn't matter if they received education in the West or on the continent. It's about the outcome. How are they using it to benefit people on the continent? You get it? So that should be our overall purpose. Our overall goal is as to the outcome. Because when you train them, you give them the best education and they end up not using it to do anything significant, then what is the point of it? So we always have to think about the outcome. So for me, it doesn't matter where. It has to do with the outcome, what it turned out to be, how they are able to use this education to lift people out of the poverty, their families, their friends, their community, and things like that. So for me, the focus has to be the outcome. What COMESA is doing is very great, right? At the end of the day, we should see students that participate in this program being very capable, taking charge of institutions on the continent, making significant impact. If they go to an institution and there are policies that are being implemented and they are not monitoring and evaluation down on these policies to see the impact of these policies, then what is the point? But if they end up in some of these institutions and they are able to change things, they are able to come up with new ideas, new solutions, that is where we want to go. So for me, at the end of the day, It's about the outcome, how we are able to use this education, regardless of where we have it, to impact the lives of the people around us and also our society. So that is what we have to think about. We always say that government in African countries should invest in the education. Right. They have to invest. But at the end of the day, when we invest, we have to think about, we are investing in science. What do we want the science to achieve for us? At the end, when we are investing in science, we should make sure that the science is able to produce the vaccine we need. You get it? But when we invest in the science and it doesn't produce the vaccine we need, come out with the changes, then what is the point of the investment? So for me, when we are investing in something, we have to think about the overall outcome. What do we want to achieve at the end of the day? You get it? And how do we want it to impact the lives of the people around us? So it's the end goal, especially for me, is the end goal at the end of the day.
I just want a
Absolutely.
quick one. I know we've come to an end, but we went very analytical about this COMESA story. It's actually a very positive story. I don't even remember saying
Yeah,
that this is a good idea, something worth
it is.
celebrating. I'm so happy to learn that something is going on like that, and hopefully we'll have more ideas like that. That is good. It's a very good development.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I also hope that with the new African Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to integrate the continent, and it's not just going to be about trade, but we are going to see more integration in other areas such as education and provision of scholarship to students to study in various parts of the continent. So it's all good. It takes time, I believe that African countries have come far, and we are learning. There've been so many mistakes that have been made, but we are learning out of it. Countries are evolving. Countries are coming out with their own resources. Even look at the way they handle the COVID situation in the 21st century. So I believe that we are doing well. We have to give ourselves a pat at the back, but we don't have to settle. There is so much to achieve. You get it? There is so much to achieve, and we need to strive for that. We need to strive for the ultimate.
Eva,
All
do
right.
I hear the talking drum telling us that it's the end of the program? I
Yes.
think I can hear it.
Okay. Yeah. So all good things, as you know, all good things must come to an end. So I want to take this
Mm.
moment to thank our viewers for joining us today, either live or after the fact. We will see you again in 2 weeks for this week. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button to subscribe to Leaders of Africa channel and join our Discord community to continue the conversation and for future program alerts. And remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thank you. And that is all for now. Until next time.